economic development which have marked the global world in recent times have reignited a new consciousness as to how to define a new world order and chart more constructive ways of fixing things. COVID-19, economic crisis, the Russian-Ukraine dispute, the turmoil in the Middle East, and especially geopolitical tension among world powers have put globalization and international relations in limbo. Amidst the chaos of today's world, where global crises loom larger than ever before, the pillars of globalization and international cooperation tremble on unstable ground. The major changes occurring at the global world have therefore, global level, have come with a ripple effect. However, there is the need for unity and cooperation as far as world leaders are concerned about solving the pressing global issues. There is a need to address, of course, the discrepancies existing among leaders, among countries. So the question is, where does globalization and international cooperation stand, and what are the challenges facing these concepts in present-day society? Welcome to you again, ladies and gentlemen. Just tuning in. This is Global Insight on the Pan-African Television for you, Media Africa. Today, we want to look at the concept of globalization and international relations or cooperation in contemporary society, where the world is facing a lot of crises ranging from economic, social, and political, as well as geopolitical crisis, as underlined in our preamble. We can cite the health hazard that was brought about by the advent of the COVID-19. We're also looking at the present crisis in the Middle East, and of course the dispute between Russian Federation and the Kyiv government. So we're looking at the involvement of the global world and seeing how these crises and all these obstacles and many more have affected or challenged globalization, which has been hailed by many to have the propensity or the probability to connect the global world. And also with these prevailing challenges, we see the concept of international relations or corporations being at a bone of contention. I want to decipher ways on how nations can redefine either the diplomatic policies to be able to close the gap or the discrepancies that exist in today's world. It is your discursive, informative program, Global Insight, and together with a panel of experts, we're going to get into greater analysis or deeper analysis on the concepts of globalization and international cooperation, looking at how the pillars of these philosophies have been challenged due to the prevailing conditions in the global world. And I will be glad to introduce to you Patrick POPPEL, who is a geopolitical analyst and also expert at the Center for Geopolitical Studies in Belgrade. Hello to you, dear Patrick, and welcome again to For You Media Africa.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much.
And looking forward to having a constructive discussion with you, dear Patrick. Let me take you now to Scotland. We're being joined by KORAD, a journalist and also finance analyst and chair of the Polish Yes for Independent Scotland, ABERDEEN. And of course, you're most welcome, KORAD.
Thank you very much for an invitation and a warm welcome from Scotland.
A pleasure having you this day. Looking forward to having a fruitful exchange with you. Let's take you now to South Africa. We'll be joined by PASEKA PHARUMELE, who is an academia convention for Pan-Africanism and progress. Hello to you, PASEKA. Pleasure having you this day.
Good day, Clarice. Thank you very much for this invitation. I'm looking forward to having an engagement with my fellow panelists. Thank you for the invite.
Thank you also for accepting the invitation. I will kick off with you, PASEKA PHARUMELE. Today we're looking at globalization and international cooperation, which has been challenged as a result of the crisis that the global world is facing, especially along the geopolitical lines. So now, before getting into these challenges and their effect on the global world, let's understand the key terms of globalization and international cooperation, and also highlight the importance in ensuring global connectivity.
Thank you, Clarice. From my understanding, globalization, I view it as making the world smaller, building rapports throughout the world, and being able to build different relationships which you wouldn't have been able to have built 2 decades ago. So globalization is basically the process of being able to interact with people throughout the world for business and for pleasure. So it is if you look at it, it is quite interlinked with international relations in the sense that it has built rapports between countries themselves. But from my own understanding, I remember in one of the classes that I was teaching, I was speaking specifically of my critique of globalization, because globalization was meant to be a project in which people all over the world would benefit from each other, where you'd be able to build different rapports with people from all over the world, where you'd be able to have benefits on the right and benefits on the left. However, that has not been the case, and that is a huge critique of globalization that I hold until this day, because globalization has led to an exploitation of countries of continents such as Africa. Globalization has resulted in reports that are pretty similar to those of in reports, actually not reports, pretty similar to those of colonization and etc. and neo-colonization. So it is it was meant to be such an amazing thing in which different places of the world would be able to connect simpler through the use of technology and etc. However, it has turned into something that is very problematic. As you can see, a lot of people also hate it because of how they have to occupy their spaces with people from other parts of the world. Specifically, if you look at how England has recently signed an agreement with Rwanda, which will send people who come from different parts, what they regard as foreigners from different parts of the world, to Rwanda so that they can process them. That is a product of globalization, but I think that is a very problematic part of globalization because it is unfair and it does not work the same the world over. I hope that I did speak a bit to what you were asking, Clarice.
Okay, yeah, of course, thank you for the introductory statement, which you highlighted some sort of problematic that we can get to better understand in the course of the program. And coming to you, Conrad, I haven't listened to the definition of globalization and, of course, it's the stakes of globalization in today's world. I want to get your viewpoint on the present or the current states of international or global cooperation, and of course how it is being affected by the ongoing crisis in the global world.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to agree with PASEKA that, of course, globalization has been presented to the human audience as something, well, not even neutral, not even the only logical solution for the international cooperation problems, but it was also presented as something from the definition, from the very beginning, only positive. And, well, we shouldn't be surprised that these arguments have been used as globalization in the real life, like we know it, was just a logical consequence of liberal or neoliberal approach. Of course, the very basic of globalization is comparative advantage theory, like already David Ricardo has written. So that all the nations could not compete, but make some kind of comparative cooperation and only earn from the international trade, let's say like that. Well, from the point of view of neoliberals, from the program which has been introduced to the main Western economies like the USA and the UK in the 80s, already in the 80s, after prevailing national state boundaries, they need wider markets, global markets, to expand. And the only one logical way of capitalist development is constant expansion in the way of any possible way. So it could be colonialism or neo-colonialism, it could be imperialism and wars, and could be, of course, some kind of the dominant ideology of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. So we've got not exactly some kind of neutral globalization, but ideological project of globalism, which is just another name for the imperialist neoliberalism, and that's the point. Of course, the present state of this globalist project is in the limbo, like you titled this debate, because well, we've got a global neoliberal project in crisis as well. We have strongly leveraged American economy facing probably the greatest crisis since the 30s. We've got very sensitive global chains of supplies, which are at permanent risk because of the wars, because of the regional conflicts, which are already here or could appear at any time. So this globalist project is in the, well, point of change, I would say, because of course it could finally victories, it could finally challenge, it could finally prevail all over other ideas of the world development, or it can face the resistance all over the world. It can face development of national states and national economies again. Yeah. It has to face strong opposition from the side of, for example, BRICS governments and BRICS economies. So I think it's a very crucial moment in the history of humanity, because in the next couple years, not even decade, but even a couple years, we can see a completely new world, with ending unipolar American capital hegemony. We can see the world multipolar one, and we can see and we can face a completely new shape of the global economy we can still cannot imagine, because, well, let's remember, it's easier for the people to imagine end of the world than the end of the capitalism. Okay. But probably we will see it very soon.
All right. Indeed, when it comes to the changes happening, there is need to revisit, of course, some of the criticisms which were advanced by some pundits pertaining the concept of globalization, as they held that it only benefits countries or economies that are already established, and of course that can actually exercise power over weaker countries. Now with this concept, Patrick, we looked at since the advent of the COVID-19 and the present crisis, especially the Ukrainian crisis, and the current crisis or turmoil in the Middle East, among others. Where can we actually place the concept of globalization and international cooperation amidst the changing global dynamics, and of course all the controversies surrounding the global world now?
So I think all these crises show us that we are living in a global world, but this global world gets new borders. This is very important. We see this in COVID-19. The border was closed. You need some tests, some certificates to go for a travel. The people were also arrested in their homes in the lockdown. Yes, so it was a world with borders, not with liberty. So, and I think the globalization model of the USA, because this is the biggest global player in this globalization project, so was ended in the February 2022 because in the beginning of the Russian special operation in Ukraine, we can show that we can see what's happened. So it is a new iron curtain between Europe, the European Union, and Russia. And Russia have also many friends, and we can see that many things are changing. The BRICS example, it's a model of global global partnership, but it's not the same what the USA like to have when they say globalization. About the COVID-19 crisis, we can also see this power of this World Health Organization and also what they are doing. So these are very, very strange organizations for our century. We don't need this. We don't need a World Health Organization. It's not important to have this. And also, I will talk and will say about the United Nations Security Council. You know, there are only 5 members inside the council. They have a permanent membership. And now we can ask, why is France or the British inside this council? Because yes, Russia is a part of this council. The USA, yes, also a big power, and China. But why the French and the British are inside? They are losing ground, and they are. We can see what's happened with France in Africa. Yes. So really, we need a new concept for this United Nations Security Council. Very important. And also we must ask, why is the place for the Security Council and the General Assembly from the United Nations in New York? Because why is New York now the capital of the world government or whatever? And also because it depends on the dollar. It only depends on the dollar. The Security Council and the General Assembly of the United Nations are in New York because the Wall Street is in New York. But I think it's better to have this council and also the assembly in maybe Vienna or in other neutral states. Why they must be in the USA? So we have very different situations now. Yes, we have this globalized world. It's working now. Yes, we are living in a globalized world. But we have new borders. We have new partnerships. We have new organizations. And I will finish to say we had also a security conference in Vienna. Also, KORAD was a member of our conference. And we get the result of our conference. We need also a totally new security architecture. So we must see if it's necessary to have these United Nations in this format, what's working now, or it's better to have other architectures for security, for political partnership, whatever, and also for economy. And also about this World Health Organization should also discuss, because they are not working very well, and they are, not the organization who should take care for the health of the people. That's true.
Okay, I'm going to stay with you, Patrick. While talking, you made a mention of something which I think is something we need to go deep into, like you know, the world is a global village, but now we can see new borders which has been brought about by the existing global crisis. And also, while Conrad was talking earlier on, he highlighted that globalization was a concept that was brought forward to see how countries can actually gain competitive advantage over other nations in the global arena. So the question is, from all of these advocated opinions, we can see for sure that the quest for power and control have led to the creation of these new borders, of course, and expose maybe the negative part of globalization that the world did not actually envisage when this concept was brought to the limelight. So the question is, how can we now work in this new world of multipolarity? Because we cannot be talking about a multipolar world and then still talking about physical borders or barriers that will derail the real functioning of the multipolar system. So how can we fix the discrepancies among nations, especially along geopolitical lines, even economic lines, and of course the social lines, by addressing all the crises that we face today?
So I say it again because I say this also in another interview in your channel. I think the best possibility to solve these problems is to create new structures for the dialogue, for the partnership, for possibility that people can talk to each other. It's very important to have new structures where the voice of the people are heard. It's very important to can hear the voice of the different countries, also the small countries, and you must give them some auditory. And this now it's not possible in the United Nations. It's not possible. Yes. So there's a big discrepancy between the reality and the possibility to talk about something. And we see this in the Ukraine crisis. We see this also in this situation in Gaza. So there is nobody in the United Nations who can stop the Ukraine conflict or who can stop this what's happening in Gaza, this genocide. So this is a big problem, and everybody think about, we don't need this organization because they couldn't help something for people. They couldn't protect the lives of the people. They couldn't make peace. When they say the United Nations are the peacemakers or peacekeepers, not. They are not. Yes. So we need totally new structures, and we must discuss this. This is very important for the future.
Indeed, it is very important for the future, setting policies that will suit the existing environment that we are in today. We are coming back to you, PASEKA, just to accentuate on what you highlighted as one setback of globalization. Indeed, it has encouraged the connectivity or interconnectivity of the global world, but particularly you see that the place of the African continent is hanging on the balance, as you underlined that through globalization, Africa has seen aspects of new colonization and exploitation, but now we cannot change the existing principle already. The question is, now that the world is taking another turn and the African continent is actually seeing a hike in multipolarism and multilateralism, how can we redefine our policies and also opt maybe diplomacy to be able to counteract this exploitation that comes in every form across the African continent? And you can attest with me that the continent has become more and more attractive even now today for global powers. It is time for Africa to take advantage of this. How can it do that? What are the parameters?
Thank you very much, Taris. That is a very difficult question, but because it has a number of answers, and all the answers depend on where you are coming from. Particularly when I think about it, I think about what is currently happening in the Francophone world, specifically in the Sahel, where people of the African continent have decided to take what is theirs and decided to own it, and in that try to get rid of those of the French. One of the colleagues mentioned something that is very important, that France is consistently being left behind, and with by the rest of the superpowers of this world being Russia, China, the United States. But I think that is not just a French problem, it is a European problem, a Western European problem in general, because I can promise you now that the UK does not necessarily have the ability to compete with China, and that is why the USA is seen as such a superpower, and NATO cannot afford to exist without the USA. So basically what I'm getting to is that it is a very difficult question because of what is currently happening throughout the world. The superpowers of past are not the same superpowers right now. And for us to be able to succeed as a continent is to make sure that we leave these superpowers of past, because these superpowers of past, specifically the colonizers such as France, such as England, these superpowers cannot anymore provide any more security and assistance to the continent of Africa to move forward. So right now it is a chance for us to build new rapport with the rest of rising powers, countries that are positioning themselves strategically throughout the world, countries that are trying to now work with Africa not from a predatory point of view, because we do know that previously the rapports that we had, the relationships or somewhat rapports that were a product of globalization have not been nice to Africa, and that is why until today we still ask ourselves, why does Africa continue to be poor when it has so much wealth in terms of mineral wealth and human resource wealth? If we are continuing to ask that question, it means that we have not understood how much the relationship with the current powers or the powers of past has actually negatively affected Africa and continues to affect it. So going back to your question and aligning it with my first point, we need to be able to do what our colleagues in the Sahel, our Francophone friends have been able to do, and to get rid of those predators that continue to benefit from the minerals, for them to be able to sustain their currencies and their economy. If we are able to do that, then we are able to build rapport first within ourselves, because I think that is one of our biggest problems in Africa, that we always want to go outside of Africa to find solutions, and historically that has not worked. For us to be able to build, for us to be able to sit on the same table as the rest of the world, we need to make sure that we stabilize ourselves first and we strengthen ourselves as a continent first, for us to be able to go out and make friends, you know, with countries that we have a choice to want to work with, because a lot of the relationships that we build are relationships that do not necessarily come as relationships of friendship where you are going to go 50-50 and you are going to benefit from each other. What happens a lot of the time with these relationships is that you have this responsibility to give a lot more than what you can actually, what you are going to receive from the so-called friend that you've built this rapport with. So it is the most essential thing to speak to the point that you are asking, for us to be able to build these rapports, these multipolar relationships that you are referring to, that are not, that can make us see a level of globalization that is actually beneficial to the continent, not one which has resulted in the continent being a consumer, not one that produces, and also not one that actually has an impact globally. So that is very tricky, but it is essential for us to be able to think about it from that point of departure, Clarice. I hope I spoke to your question.
Of course, very important, and it is about defining Africa's agenda amidst the global changes. Some pundits are of the view that if we can go back to adopting the philosophy of the forefathers, fathers of Pan-Africanism, the likes of Kwame Nkrumah and the others, so that the African unity can be stronger, then the continent will address these issues as one a strong force that will give it a stronger or a louder voice across the global arena. And of course, the scope seems to be very greater at this particular moment. Coming back to you, Conrad, we are looking at the concept of globalization and international cooperation, and we have seen that all of these happens to be one of the reasons why the world is in chaos. Today we see countries divided along the lines or the problems pertaining the Russia and Ukraine. Of course, we recently, the United States actually voted a bill that will send more aid and ammunition to the government of Kyiv and also to Israel. And of course, these concepts we are looking at were created by mankind for what reasons, what we are already discovering in the course of the program. Now, you know, the recent geopolitical tension and even the crisis in the Middle East and elsewhere, Africa and the global world at large have come to expose the you know, the intentions which have always been hidden in the dark as far as countries were concerned, pertaining maybe bilateral cooperation or multilateral cooperations with one another. And we see that the geopolitical fight is what is developing or dividing or creating these discrepancies along in the global world. So how can we advance global peace and stability in this era of geopolitical tension? What is the probability or possibility of world leaders attaining this global peace to make the world safe for humanity, which is, I think, is the prime objective of human life?
Yeah, I think that we can now see exactly how interconnected are regional conflicts. So we can consider war in Ukraine, Zionist aggression against Gaza, tensions between the USA and China about Taiwan. That's as kind of local regional conflict, but in fact they are strongly interconnected. So we've got globalization of war, globalization of international struggles, and well, if we follow these links, we can find the same signs of the global tensions. For example, in Africa, in Sahel, we can observe the same approach of the neo-colonial former empires towards the former colonies. We can observe, for example, American policy of deciding who African or Asian and especially South American countries could cooperate with. We remember just several weeks ago this ridiculous mission of Secretary Nuland to convince African countries not to cooperate with China. Yeah? So, and the only offer from the American side was declining of direct investment, American investments, and of course so-called humanitarian aid, which is only other name for the no-colonial dependency, keeping African countries in the no-colonial dependency. So with all these realities, we can find that revival of national economies and national states, of course, is the first step to the normality and to the multipolar future world we can think about. next step, that would be some kind of multi-regional cooperation. Some we can observe, of course, in some parts of the world, but this multi-regional cooperation is, of course, still pressed, and it makes it very hard to achieve such a level of cooperation, because there are still very strong influence of neo-colonial, imperial, former superpowers. And we can observe it directly on the African example, when any kind of continental cooperation and a kind of an attempt to build some kind of institutional cooperation between African states is sabotaged by France, by the United Kingdom, and by the USA. And if I cannot do it in the diplomatic way, they can, of course, use some kind of economical, financial push factors against that. They can use their influence in the International Monetary Fund, and if they have no other choice, they make just another coup d'etat in the African country. That's how they always work for decades. So, of course, multi-regional cooperation is absolutely crucial for the future multipolar world as well. But first, we have to and all these elements of the neo-colonial dependency from London, from Washington, from Paris, and from other Western capitals. And another, of course, important element is what has Patrick mentioned, that we have to think if we really need this transnational organization like WHO, like FAO. So, we have organizations which we are not responsible for of anyone. They can decide about our health, about our food supply, about our living conditions, and they are ruled only by the global elite of the global financier, strongly related to the international global banking system. And, of course, to the main superpowers. So, yes, we have to think about new international global structure of the national states and multi-regional mutually beneficial organization. And we have to think about the new ideas, because definitely Africa, which surprised the world in the already 60s with Pan-African idea, had to return to these roots and has to find own way, find own new African idea. That would be the very important move towards multipolar world in the global scale.
Indeed, it's a very brilliant move to take. It will be for the African continent as countries re-strategizing and, of course, redefining policies that will suit the existing times. To you, Patrick, we have looked at some of these problems and highlighted the challenges, especially faced by weaker countries in the global world, as the concept of globalization stands to benefit more of the already established powers. So now the question is, how can or to what extent has maybe the rise of populist movement and even nationalist agendas have impacted international cooperation amid global crisis, and how advantageous are these movements or agendas towards defining the sovereignty of nations, be it along political, economic, or social sovereignty, that will help countries integrate well and benefit together from the international cooperation and the togetherness of the global world?
So I think we are now living in the time of decolonization. It's very important. So it's not happened before. Now we have the situation that many of the nations are growing up their possibilities, and before they are sleeping. So we have a very new age begins now of sovereign countries they are finding possibilities to work together and join new partnerships. Is the first important point. And I think, yes, yes, of course, now there are many movements also in different countries. They are more for the national interest and against the globalization. We have some of these movements everywhere, yes. But I think everything of this depends on new structures and very, very simple decisions. We make very high-level analysis and thinking about projects. They are very complex topics, yes? But many of the things are very, very easy. So the headquarters of the United Nations must be removed to a neutral country, maybe to Austria. First of all, not to stay in the USA, near the Wall Street. It's not the place for the United Nations assemble and the security funds. We must remove this to a neutral country, first. Second, the people, the states, also the very small countries, they must leave the World Health Organization. They must leave. They must cancel the partnership in the World Health Organization. One country after the next. This is also a very important movement when this happens. To get out from this World Health Organization, to remove the United Nations headquarters, these are very, very simple questions, but these are strategic factors. And also, we don't know what's happening in the European Union, because we can see now we have no common European idea. The Hungarians and the people, Dutch people and the French people, they have nothing common about geopolitical strategy. Yes, so I think also the European Union will have end next years, maybe. The English go out of the European Union, maybe the other countries will also go this way. I think we have now different populistic movements in different countries. Many of them are very good movements, but many of them also a creation of the secret services, because they are fight oppositions. Yes, so you can see the very worst situation in Serbia, but also in Germany and Austria. So about the movements from the people, I don't believe now that there will be big successes. But now the world is going a totally other way than the last 20 years. We can see this. And one of these topics I have talked is this decolonization. So many parts of the future will depend what's happening in Africa. So because about the resources, very important. So I think we must make the focus first of this decolonization, and then we can see in which way the world is going.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Just to remind those tuning in that this is Global Insight. And for you, my dear Africa, we are looking at the concept of globalization and international cooperation, and of course, how these concepts have been put on a balance or live in limbo as a result of the present interconnected crisis. And of course, how can we bring solutions to these problems and make the world benefit from the advantages of an interconnected world? Coming to you, PASEKA PHARUMELE, we are looking at this globalization, and it was for countries to benefit from being in a good relationship with the others. So now the question, how do you think countries can balance the need for global interconnectedness, beg your pardon, through this concept of globalization with the rising concern of protecting national interest and sovereignty? You know, if you see the Sahel region, the Sahel nations taking the bold step to leave the ECOWAS and to redefine principles that will guide their or policies that will guide their nations from today and in the years to come. It's because of the fact that they want to protect the sovereignty of the nation, and of course this relates to some of the problems some countries are facing in the global world. So how can we utilize this concept of globalization, of course, in such a way that we are going to protect our national interest and also our sovereignty, and of course the relationship will be win-win and of course beneficial for all parties involved?
Thank you, Clarice. Thank you for that, Clarice. You know, it is a very difficult thing to do, and the reason why I believe that it is very difficult to do is because globalization tends to have an effect on a country's sovereignty, especially depending on which country it is and where that country is located. That is very key, because the reason I say that is that the same World Health Organizations that the colleagues have been speaking to, they've shown themselves that they are able to attempt to override a country's sovereignty by speaking to certain rules and regulations in that country, and etc. We saw it again, and we continue to see it with the ICC, International Criminal Court, who it decides is a international criminal that it needs to arrest or to rule on. These bodies themselves, they have shown themselves to be very prejudiced. They've shown themselves to be very biased, because these bodies do not hold global leaders accountable in the same way and nature. They do not. And them not being able to do that, it's not even a matter of not being able to, it's just a matter of who do they think is someone that they will be able to successfully, prosecute. You know, and it is, and as we have learned, it depends on which country you come from. So many American presidents have been responsible for so many wars. We know that England was part responsible for what we are currently seeing in Libya, along with the United States. We know what France has done in Africa and continues to do. We see right now the current protests that are happening in America that are not getting the same light. So the reason, as you would normally see if it was in Iran, if it was in Russia, if it was in China. So what I'm getting to is that sovereignty is a big problem, but not for everyone. There are countries who are able to hold on to their sovereignty and still form part of these global bodies, thus have globalization work for them. And then there are countries who just cannot be a part of these, who cannot have their own sovereignty. So that's why I say that globalization and sovereignty is a very difficult concept to think about. But I think the main thing is that it depends on where you come from. But as I said with my previous comment, for us to be able to protect ourselves, for us to actually be able to make globalization work for us as the continent of Africa, it requires only one thing, and that thing is for us to be politically liberated, economically liberated, and for us to form as one. Because a more powerful continent of Africa, not countries within Africa, is a more powerful union that should be able to negotiate its space on the table. Because outside of that, it is difficult for us to actually believe that we are able to coexist in this globalized world, and we are able to benefit the same way from globalization, and we are able to successfully navigate our way and discuss pricing on our own terms. It's a matter of power. It's a power dynamic at the end of the day, and that is what is a product of globalization, Clarice. I hope I spoke to your question.
Absolutely, of course, PASEKA. And in the same perspective with you, Conrad, when we look at all of these setbacks, globalization and international cooperation, we begin to look at international institutions. The United Nations Security Council has already been underlined by Patrick, and we heard the ICC, and let's look at the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. In what ways have recent global crises highlighted the shortcomings of these institutions in fostering effective global cooperation or international relations and giving importance to the concept of globalization? And if we have some setbacks in these organizations, how can we fine-tune these organizations in present-day society to address the discrepancies that are separating the North from the South, or the supposed superpowers from the developing nations?
Yeah, well, I believe that the COVID pandemic time was a perfect example how these international organizations, well, are not able to manage any kind of international, transnational crisis, because we could observe absolute absence, for example, of inactivity of the European Union till the last months when they started to use COVID pandemic as a kind of justification for the energy transition in Europe, and then it was replaced by the war in Ukraine as a justification of these changes in transformation in the energy markets. We observed that United Nations are absolutely absent in this within this crisis. The only global organization very active, and of course in the very negative way, was the World Health Organization, which pretended to be some kind of the global government that time. So yeah, well, from the purely practical point of view, we observed during COVID pandemic that only national states could face any kind of crisis like that. Of course, we've got two examples in Europe how it should be done. So Belarus and Sweden, who was the only two states in Europe who avoided all this pandemic absurdity. So that was the example how sovereign Belarus could really manage own problems without the dependence of the Western and international global centers of powers. And well, we should follow this example. We should follow this example because exactly the same. There is when we face the crisis of the global neoliberalism. I believe that there is no analytic, no expert who could now support further existence of the International Monetary Fund in the present on the present level. Yeah? We definitely need some kind of the new Bretton Woods conference, some kind of the international conference of sovereign national economies, resetting and re-establishing new global currency system. Of course, not to create global governance, not to create global currency like neoliberals would advise to the world, but to find the way how further development could be more equal, could be more not based on exploitation, not based on oppression, not based on no colonialism anymore. It's absolutely crucial for countries which are possibly could be self-sufficient in very crucial strategic foreign nations, and that's the step. When we think internationalists, first we have to be nationalists in the very, of course, positive and way, looking for cooperation on the local, regional, and then global scale, but between equal and independent states.
Indeed, it's between equal and independent states where all the parties will respect the autonomy of nations. I will stay with you, Conrad. Of course, you highlighted some points pertaining how we can revamp these international institutions and make them more general than particular in terms of reacting to problems that pertain the global world at large. In the face of globalization and international cooperation, we promote global interdependence, but sometimes it has been seen, especially from the maybe the perspective of the African continent, that still has a lot of issues to do as far as defining its voice at the international arena. We can be tempted to say that sometimes in promoting this global interdependence, the most nations sometimes forget the aspect of maybe prioritizing the national interest, as you rightly underlined in your analysis. So should nations prioritize these local interests or self-sufficiency, which I think is important, over global independence or interdependence in the face of ongoing and future crises?
Yeah, well, definitely, I believe that. Another important aspect.
Please, can you unmute your mic?
No, I am unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can hear you now.
I can hear you.
Yeah. Another important aspect is to avoid this Eurocentrism. I believe that very often when we make any kind of a geopolitical or even geo-economical analysis, we still focus on European issues. We still think like it was, Berlin conference ongoing, and every important decisions should be made between Berlin, London, Paris, and with addition of Washington, of course. And it's not happening, lucky for everyone, anymore. It's the end of the Europe age in the global history because of the involvement of European elites in the neoliberal global ideology. European Union, like Patrick rightly mentioned, is some kind of globalization in miniature. They try to make that as an experiment against national consciousness, against national interests, against the sovereignty of nations. They try to rebuild new construct with the new society built completely on emigrants, refugees, with some kind of new ideology of not only liberalism but also some kind of deviation like transgender or religious approach toward the climate questions. Yeah, so they made completely new project, ideological project, with own faith, with own saints, with own new leaders, to create some kind of experimental new nation, new society for the whole European Union. Of course, this project failed. And exactly the same, any kind of project of creating some kind of the, new humanity for without consciousness, without their own roots, without the integrity, is the same. It has to fail definitely, and especially that's a kind of false ideology, of course, because we can observe that in the Western economies. I living in the United Kingdom, I see exactly where it's going to. They still treat, for example, Africa as a just source of the cheap labor, and of course of the source of the resources. The France politics is exactly the same. They need Sahel, they need influences in Africa only to get uranium and any other resources just grabbed from this continent. They still think about the relations between this failed experiment of New Europe and the rest of the world as a continuing former neo-colonial policy. And exactly when we face the problem of these false receipts, false answers for the true problems, we have to think even more about what constitute ourselves, our identities, our consciousness, what makes us nations, what make us societies, what make us humans also. And that's the point when this line, this red line between the global elites and the rest of the human race is absolutely the most visible, I believe, that they want new world without the humanity. They want just the world of slaves and the masters. So we have to think about another rebel against these self-declared masters.
Indeed, it's a high time to be conscious, like you've highlighted, to define the consciousness, the identity, and of course, most importantly, the values that define a community or a country as a whole. Now, we are talking, of course, globalization, international relations or cooperation, and of course, all boils down to humanity and how those at the forefront, the stakeholders in charge of making decisions. Of course, the world has been defined this way, yeah? And how these decisions should not actually put the innocent or the population, a vulnerable population, in a state of in a deplorable state. Coming to you, Patrick, this of course is bringing me to the bringing us to the recent reactions from other countries pertaining the crisis in the Middle East. We're talking about the crisis that has engulfed about 40,000 people, and then being dead and wounded. And of course, looking at the reactions, it's true, countries have been very calling for the cessation of hostilities. But then when we see a nation like the United States voting a bill to send arms to these countries at war, we begin to ask, of course, the question of how geopolitical tensions and power dynamics between major global powers have affected international cooperation in addressing ongoing global crisis and the place of humanity in all of these happenings. So with all this already a reality, again, what is the feasible thing to do, especially as far as the organizations or major stakeholders are concerned, to address these decisions which largely are taken by a collective elites that have decided, I don't know how to put it, to maybe hold the world hostage in line with some of the decisions that they take that negatively affect humanity?
This question is very, very hard, because we're talking about this plan, this movement of the United States. They are like to control everything on this world, and they are involved in every conflict. We should not forget this. When we talk about two big crises, the Ukraine crisis and this what's happening in Gaza, in both of these conflicts, the United States are involved. They arranged this coup, this cup in Kiev, Maidan Cup, 2014, and they are the biggest ally of Israel. Yes. So we have two big conflicts now, and the United States are involved. Then we have this possible conflict, what's maybe will be in the South Chinese Sea, Taiwan, and who is there involved? This is the United States of America. And then we talk about Africa. Okay, we have also the players like like French or also the British, but also there, the interests of the United States of America. So this is the biggest problem. The United States of America, with the policy now, with the policy, is the biggest problem for the sovereignty of states, of people, for the global peace, and for also for growing up new structures, because they don't like this. They have their own structures and they control them. The United Nations, the NATO, all of them are under the control of the United States, in the reality. The same you can see also about the World Health Organization. And I think everything depends on the dollar, on the power of the dollar. This is the important question, because all these coups, all these wars, all these regime changes and influence and fake news, all these are paid by the dollar. It's very important to know about it. So I think the new economic projects, the new economic cooperation, like BRICS, and new other structures for global security and development of political relations between the different countries, will be against the dollar. So I think we will have a future without the domination of the dollar. Very important. It's the domination, yes. And I think the world will rescue itself when they are leaving the dollar system and this domination of dollar. This will be the future. Yes, I can only say this.
Okay, thank you so much, Patrika. In the same perspective, with you, PHARUMELE. Now we are looking at all of this, and of course there is always need to strike a balance, to look for an intersection where where the positive aspect of these concept, international relations, globalization. If of course we are advocating for a multipolar world, there is need to even build more a stronger bond among nations of the world. But each country has to be intentional and, of course, advocate national interests that will make it benefit from this. But this is actually still a challenge in present day Africa. PASEKA, PHARUMELE. And now, in the quest to reconcile the benefits of globalization and the risks of the risks of globalization. Risks includes, pandemics, climate change, geopolitical tension, and the infringement in people's sovereignty. And the benefits will also include the economic growth, things like cultural exchanges, and you can name the rest. So, where is the place of Africa as far as defining this line of intersection is concerned? I want us to draw particularly, PHARUMELE, on the point, the place of the African Union in redefining strategies, in standing in one accord while addressing issues of international interest that will automatically benefit the continent.
Thank you very much, Clarice. To
Please,
a
can you
point, I think
unmute
that
your
I
mic
did.
up, Seka?
I don't know. I'm unmuted, Clarice. Can you hear me?
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
All right. So, I think I did somewhat speak to this earlier when I was trying to speak to the solution and the way forward. I think if we want to make a multipolar
a globalized world, a functional and a successful one for Africa, we need to look at things such as BRICS and the potential of BRICS and how much BRICS has strengthened its members socioeconomically, globally. Because the formation of bodies such as BRICS will make us have an ability to argue against bodies such as the IMF, the World Health Organization, because, as we said, that these are Western-run bodies that are they are used as proxies actually by Western countries to be able to sustain their own observation of developing countries. These are bodies that are used to also control how developing bodies, developing countries are supposed to move in terms of how they're supposed to attempt to develop themselves through their loans. And we know that these loans have often been proven to be very problematic. And that is why I say that something as BRICS is so important, because it actually does speak to the problems that are created by bodies such as the IMF and the World Bank. And I think if you go back to read why BRICS was created, it was specifically for that. So basically what I'm getting at is that alternative relationships are the best option for us to actually enjoy globalization. And that is a positive, I believe, of globalization in itself, because what it has done is that it has shown us that there are alternatives out there. You have the ability to work with alternative countries instead of those countries that were imposed on us for a very long time. Yeah. You know, it has shown us that you are able to buy medicine from Russia instead of buying medicine from the United States. We saw how the media, Western media specifically, was on overdrive during COVID, and them trying to disprove or to reject the Russian COVID vaccine. You know, and in itself, that also shows you how Western media in itself is a feeding animal, is feeding the animal that is white Western supremacy, in that it has a responsibility, it plays the job of the proxy of disinformation to the rest of the world, and we consume it as it comes. And by it doing that, it means that it can strengthen the West in general. And how this has worked out in history is that we have been consuming it, and we have been looking at ourselves as friends of countries that have been predators to the continent of Africa, specifically countries such as the USA, as the UK, as France, as Germany, and the likes. So the use of the media has been very powerful for the West. But what happened over time, and that is a positive of globalization, what happened was that we were able to now get alternative sources of information, specifically through the creation of social media, which I can argue is a tool of globalization itself, because in itself, it also shortens the distance between people. You are able to build reports with people in China. I can have a chat with you right now, and you are in Cameroon, colleagues, Poland, Scotland, you know, colleagues are in Europe, and we're able to have this conversation. That in itself has actually come back to show us that globalization is possible, and a platform such as this one can exist because of a tool of globalization such as what we are currently using to have this discussion and engagement. And in business, it also works the same. It shows that there is potential for us to be able to build these rapports with the rest of the West, specifically Russia, specifically China, India, and the likes, and some countries in Southern America. You know, so I think that is a big positive that we should look at. As much as I have a huge critique of globalization, and I think since the start of the program, I've been speaking to my critique of why it is problematic, I do believe, though, there is positivity in that we are here right now because of tools of globalization. Thank you.
Thank you, of course, PASEKA. Indeed, it is always imperative to look at both sides of issues, and of course, we capitalize on the positive aspect of the concepts because the world is already connected. We just need to take what is positive from it, and of course, do with what will not help us. And we can see that it is thanks to this globalization that many countries in Africa have come to the realization that in spite of being independent, there are still a very dependent, patterning some of the colonial policies which were actually impacted on the African continent, and that's why we see today a revolution. That's why we see today a renaissance of a new mindset and new policies across the African continent. And I think it's also high time for African diplomacy to take another dimension, to be able to benefit, of course, from the 21st century globalization, from the 21st century multipolarity. Now, coming to you, Conrad, let's try to understand, when we talk about this concept, we want to look at how, you were the one who pointed out that we are trying to move from the unipolar world to a multipolar world. And some critics are still of the view that though the world is seems to be unipolar, and that multipolarity is also going to be very fragile, because as it stands with all these geopolitical confrontation, competition, and even the maybe cultural differences and other vices affecting the entire world, the world seems to be more fragmented, bringing a question mark if the state of the current state of global affairs is an indicative shift of a paradigm from a multipolar world to a more fragmented world.
Yeah, well, that would be absolutely
Very
right.
problematic indeed.
Yeah, if not our experience, especially from the last 3 decades, there was no time, no period in the history when so many wars have been provided by the Western powers in the reality of the so-called end of history, triumph of the Western so-called culture, but in the same time, they always need enemies, especially American hegemon needs enemies to be attacked everywhere in the world. So it was absolutely unstable world, even being unipolar. That's the fact. So no one can deny that. So any transition from that could be imaginably better than this condition of the permanent one-sided aggression from the United States and the allies. So first of all. Secondly, well, from the global point of view, we can remember as well that the world of the bipolar stabilization, world of the Cold War, was somehow much less fragile, much more stabilized than the one we know now. So now the moment is not about creating some kind of new balance of powers. It's not a kind of that, for example, China will replace United States as the global hegemon. No, that's not the point. That's not the purpose also of the Chinese policy. We don't want now, or we don't need that balance of power. We need power of balance. That's the point. And multipolar world is, of course, very hard to be described now. It could have very many faces, many possibilities how it appears. But so for now, we know that we are in transition, but we are not exactly sure where we are going to. So that's the point. And well, yeah, absolutely, I agree with PASEKA about the positives of global interconnectivity, because it's the very important aspect of the cooperation against globalism, neoliberal imperialist globalism. I always remind that that was the Vladimir Lenin who said that capitalists themselves sell us the rope we hang them on. So that's the point. Yeah. So yet it's still up to date sentence. So yes, we have to use these tools. Well, another example on the economical level is China policy. China is absolutely beneficent of the well understand globalization. Yeah? It's now one of the main sources of the global finance capital, used in the very friendly manner for mutually beneficial manner for the other states, is the crucial element of the global supply chain, and it's also beneficial to globalization. And well, that would be very hard to imagine what could happen if, for example, with another war on Taiwan or somewhere else, these global supply chains could be broken by the American Western aggression. So yeah, we have to find the good fruits from the tree of globalization, but of course we have to in the same time eliminate all these poison fruits, all these insects who try to destabilize the world and destroy any thinking about the mutually beneficial cooperation. Let's remember, they want domination, they want hegemony on the ideological, financial, and geopolitical level, and we couldn't accept that. We need cooperation, not domination.
Indeed, we need cooperation and not domination. And I think that aligns with the philosophy of balance of power that you highlighted, Conrad. To you, Patrick, with all said, and of course, knowing the stakes and the fragility of affairs around the global world, especially as far as the quest to be in control is concerned. So let's also consider this the aspect of regional conflict. So in what ways do regional conflicts and dispute impact the ability of nations to come together and find solutions to shared global challenges? Patrick?
So I talk about this. We need new structures for the dialogue also.
Yeah.
So we need some structures like the United Nations, but not under control of one big power. Mm-hmm. So this is a possibility to have the dialogue also in times of conflict and problems. We need some platforms for the discussion and for the dialogue. It can be centralized on one city, or it can be also some other format. But we need new international organizations, and I like to remember this. This is very, very important to have new organizations, because the old organizations are under the control of the elites and the big Western powers, and so they have no auditory in on other continents. You can see how many people living in Africa, how important is Africa for the economy of the Western countries, but they are not in the Security Council of the United Nations as a permanent member, yes, but they are not inside. Or India, yes, and so this is not the format for the dialogue between the big players of the world. And Africa becomes big player now, and also we have the situation what's happening in India. We have new countries, they are joining the BRICS. They also will be more powerful than before, yeah. And but they have no place in the Security Council of the United Nations. So we need new structures. They are working without this hegemony from America and the dollar, and we need also on different levels. We need different structures. Yeah. It's good also to have some organization for the health of the people. but it should be not the World Health Organization. Yes, this is important. So we need new structures on every level for this cooperation between the countries, and this will be the solution. It's a question of structures and organizations.
Okay, thank you so much, Patrick. We'll be ending this session with you. PASEKA PHARUMELE, United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres once said, and I read, the divergence between developed and developing countries is at the root of the geopolitical tension and lack of trust that poison every area of global cooperation, from vaccine to sanctions to trade. And of course, the question is, conversant with this, what practical dispensations do you think can be used to widen this gap existing, to bridge the gap, I beg your pardon, existing between the developed world and the developing world? And of course, to make the world a safe place for humanity while promoting the dogma of a safe haven for humanity. PASEKA?
Sorry, yeah, there I was muted. Sorry about that. The first thing that needs to happen, Clarice, is Western imperialistic powers need to be moved away from controlling African countries. Specifically, the USA has so many bases the world over, military bases, that is, the world over. And that on its own speaks about the USA's control of global politics and discourses. The first thing that needs to happen is for them to make sure that they are removed from here, because you do not have a military base, a Cameroonian military base in the USA, or a Tanzanian military base in the USA or close to the USA. They would bomb you if you were even trying to put a military base in Mexico. So with that being said, I think it is essential for us to say that means they have invested interest in what is happening here. So the solution is for them to for us to make sure that external powers that continue to manipulate this, that continue to take advantage of African countries, that continue to corrupt our corrupt leaders, because our leaders are also a problem to us. Because if we have to take a decision to move forward, we need to be serious and realistic about our own leaders who continue to be puppets of the West. If we are able to make sure that we break that relationship and we have ethical leaders who are there for our own good and who are there for our own needs, then only then would we be able to close that said gap that we are speaking about. At this moment, there is no positivity to the West and the rest of the West, first world so-called countries. There is no advantage to them helping us become on par with them. It is illogical. They have nothing to gain from that. So if they have nothing to gain from us being superpowers such as the way that they are, then we cannot expect them to be somewhere or anywhere near us to help us to elevate ourselves to a better socio-economic and political space. So that's why we need to make sure that we deal with ourselves first, deal with our own leadership first, and then only then would we be able to get on the same wavelength with the rest of the world. I think that is the final answer, Clarice.
Indeed, it's about getting on the same wavelength with the rest of the world while enjoying the advantages that come with an interconnected world, with interrelations or international relations. It is imperative for countries to strategize and, of course, go to the table of the international arena with a strong strategy that will, first of all, foster the interest of individual nations, protect sovereignty, and ensure economic buoyancy while they interact with other nations. And they can do this particularly by redefining diplomacy and, of course, looking at the foreign policies and how the world can be better when we come together. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your great insight on today's edition of Global Insight on For You Media Africa. I want to appreciate you all, and also for to the technical crew for ensuring that the program was a success. I want to appreciate our millions of viewers out there for trusting the Pan-African television. Indeed, it's a moment of transformation. And remember, it's another view of the world. And by so doing, through this educative information and discursive programs, we can make a milestone to make the world indeed a better place. Do have a lovely time in the company of our transmissions.